4.7 million years ago, discover the incredible, heartwarming life of our prehistoric ancestors. In a dusty corner of the local museum, Sarah's fingers brushed against the rough surface of an ancient stone tool. The quiet hum of the afternoon faded away as the weight of history enveloped her. Here, in the dim light, was a world where families fought for survival through sheer grit and determination, their stories etched into the very fabric of time. Sarah's heart raced. She was a mother, a teacher, a daughter wrestling with her own burdens. How much did her life mirror these ancient souls who had faced daunting odds? The thought coursed through her mind, igniting a spark of hope that almost felt tangible. Each day in her classroom, she inspired her spirited 10-year-old son, Jake, to question, explore, and dream. But outside those walls, budget cuts threatened not just art programs, her lifeline to creativity, but the very essence of their community. The thought tightened her chest. How could she give Jake a brighter future if the support around them was crumbling? The weight of it all pressed on her, heavy as stone, as she watched her son's laughter intertwine with her worries. But today, within these vibrant artifacts, she found a connection, a glimpse into a family's battle against the harsh realities of existence millions of years ago. They were not so different from her. Their faces reflected sacrifice and resilience. The parallels spun a web of strength around her, and she wondered, what if she could channel that ancient courage to rally her town? This gave her a spark, igniting her ambition to unite her neighbors for the community fundraiser to save both the museum and the school programs she poured her heart into. Before she could dive too deep into her daydream, blurred echoes of laughter filled her ears. She turned to find Jake weaving between guests as he shared snack trays at the bustling community bake sale. That boy was her son, ever bright and relentless. Yet, beneath her smiles lurked the tension with another family member, her estranged father. A troubled veteran struggling against an endless storm of his past stormed back into her life, pushing aside the fragile fabric of the world she had built. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the community came together amidst laughter and warm, heartwarming stories, Sarah's anticipation grew. But that evening, a misunderstanding festered, friends were alienated, and her father, hurting and vulnerable, was pushed away once more. Guilt gnawed at her as she tried to piece together their unraveling relationship, and, as the fundraiser approached, the dual pressure of saving the town's heritage and mending her family strained her like never before. As the day of the fundraiser dawned, Sarah faced a pivotal moment. Standing before a crowd with her father only a few steps behind, she glanced at the faces of her neighbors and felt the weight of their expectations. She was on the brink of revealing a truth that could either heal broken ties or deepen wounds. Time slowed, breaths hitched, as she mustered the courage to reclaim her father's honor. Would exposing his sacrifices lead them toward forgiveness, or shatter their fragile bond forever? The air buzzed with anticipation as she prepared to speak, ground trembling beneath her feet, and in that split snapshot of destiny, everything hung in the balance. As the spotlight settled on Sarah, she felt her heart thumping a relentless rhythm in her chest. Voices faded to a low murmur, and the colorful decorations of the fundraiser blurred into a watercolor backdrop. She opened her mouth, ready to share what weighed on her heart, but the words felt like stones lodged in her throat. Jake's cheerful laughter drifted through the crowd, sharpening her focus. He was there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, a plate of cookies resting on his lap, his smile radiating joy that only a child could possess. His innocence reminded her of the light in their lives, the connection that had always been their foundation. She took a breath, searching the familiar faces in the crowd, some full of hope, others edged with anxiety. The stakes were high. "Thank you all for coming today," she began, her voice stronger than she felt. "This fundraiser is not just about saving a museum or a school program. It's about coming together as a community, sharing our stories, and bridging the gaps that divide us. She felt her father's presence weigh heavily behind her, an anchor to her unsteady resolve. As she continued, she glanced at him. The lines on his face were deepened by years of regret, moments lost. Her heart went out to him, full of compassion despite the hurt. "My dad," she paused, noticing a few listeners exchanged knowing glances. "He's a Vietnam veteran. And I want to take a moment to honor his sacrifices. He dealt with things that many of us will never understand." A quiet ripple spread through the audience. The tension in the air shifted, and Sarah felt the shackles around her emotions begin to loosen. "I've struggled to understand him, just as he may have struggled to understand me. But today, here, I want us to remember that we can learn and grow together." She heard her voice crack, raw emotion bubbling to the surface. "If we can embrace our pain, we can find healing." The silence in the room was almost deafening. Could they really be ready to hear her? Amidst the hushed anticipation, a bold voice spoke up from the back of the room. "You're speaking the truth, Sarah. We've all been hurt one way or another." It was Jessica, a neighbor she had once clashed with. The unexpected support felt like a lighthouse in a storm. Encouraged, Sarah pressed on. "I believe we can turn our pain into strength. We can change our community by starting here, by understanding one another, by lifting each other up instead of pulling away." She glanced back at her father, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. He looked vulnerable yet hopeful. This was a step in the right direction. Just then, a commotion at the entrance broke her focus. A group of veterans had arrived, their uniforms crisp and former glories shining through their worn bravado. They exchanged hugs, shaky smiles, and gentle pats on the back, and Sarah felt the atmosphere shift again, like a rising tide washing away old grief. But as her father's gaze darted towards them, she noticed a flicker of something darker, a flash of regret mixed with fear. Was he prepared for this reunion? For the memories that would flood back into the room? The truth was a double-edged sword, sharp enough to cut deep into the past. As she wrapped up her speech with a heartfelt plea for unity, emotions hung in the air like ripe fruit waiting to fall. Hope mingled with trepidation. Would they all embrace the chance for healing, or would old wounds resurface anew? She took one last breath, looking out at the crowd that seemed to hold its own collective heartbeat. And in that moment, she realized one truth: their stories were intertwined, and it was time to face the chapters yet unwritten. As she descended from the makeshift stage, she could feel her father rising from his seat, an uncertain step that might lead to a new path or a familiar one filled with pain. Which would it be? She trembled with fear and anticipation, wondering if this was truly the moment they would begin to heal together. And then, as her heart raced with each approaching step of her father, a question loomed larger than ever. Would they finally reconnect, or would the life they built together and apart continue to remain fractured? The room was thick with anticipation as her father stood to his feet. His footsteps echoed like thunder, each one a reminder of the battles he'd faced beyond the comfort of home. Sarah held her breath, hoping he'd take the leap towards her, yet fearing the storm of emotions that might follow. He approached slowly, eyes fixed on hers, and for a fleeting moment, she saw a glimmer of the man he used to be, full of strength, pride, and a warmth that had long been overshadowed by shadows of the past. As he closed the gap, she felt a jolt of electricity surge between them, a connection that transcended their years of silence. "Sarah," he began, his voice barely rising above a whisper. The crowd seemed to dim around them, their words fading until only his voice remained bare, raw, and trembling. "Dad," she managed to say, her own heart racing. "I'm so glad you're here." A warm smile broke through her nerves, an offering of peace. He hesitated, guilt etched into the lines of his face. "I've missed so much." His words weighed heavy, each one a brick in the wall between them. "I didn't know how to be here for you." Sarah's chest tightened, the familiar ache surfacing within her. "Maybe we can figure it out together?" The plea felt vulnerable, but it was also healing. From behind her, a murmuring wave surged as the veterans mingled with the crowd. Old voices rose and fell, sharing stories, laughter, and apologies that echoed through the space like an unexpected choir suddenly aware of shared chronologies. Sarah caught glimpses of their past lives in the stories, the kind of darkness that often lurked in silence. "Look at them," she breathed, gesturing to a particularly animated group near the snack table. "They found their way back to each other. What if we could do the same?" Her father watched them, his gaze softened. The tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. He nodded, the motion slow and deliberate. "It's not easy to face what's buried inside us." "Are you sure you want to, Dad?" "I'm ready," she declared, her voice clear and unwavering. "We don't have to do this alone." He inhaled deeply, as if fortifying himself against visible memories that threatened to overwhelm him. "I always thought I was protecting you by keeping my distance." Tears pricked the corners of Sarah's eyes. They were not just tears of sadness but of understanding, the realization that pain could both divide and unite. "We can learn from it, Dad. That's how we grow. You've been fighting your ghosts for so long. It's time to let me in." He looked down at her, vulnerability spilling over the edges of his steady demeanor. "I don't want to let you down again. You never did. You just lost your way for a while." This time, he reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he took hers. The warmth of his grasp sent a ripple of comfort through her, a promise of hope buried in each interlaced finger. Before they could fully embrace the moment, a familiar laugh cut through the air. It was Jake, oblivious to the weight of adult conversations. The sight of his little body racing towards them with a plate of cookies felt like light breaking through clouds, illuminating a path ahead. "Mom! Dad! Look what I made!" he exclaimed, holding the plate high like a trophy of childhood good. People around them turned, laughter erupting, drawing them into the warmth of communal joy. "Jake, that's amazing!" Sarah beamed, her voice glittering with affection. "Can we eat them before they see?" he whispered conspiratorially, eyes glimmering, the laughter spread, weaving through the crowd. Sarah turned to her father, heart swelling at this tiny moment that felt monumental. This was their chance not just to engage with the past, but to finally step into a shared future, but while the warmth grew, she could still sense the lingering shadows. There remained unspoken questions hanging in the air. Could they truly navigate the path of healing together? What other truths were waiting to surface during this reunion of hearts? Just as the laughter wrapped around them, she felt the weight of her own emotions shifting yet again. And she wondered if, after all this time, love could truly mend what was once broken. Would they have the courage to face everything that still lay ahead? The sound of laughter enveloped them, a blanket of comfort amidst the tension. Jake's excited chatter broke through the silence that had hung in the air just moments before. Sarah watched her son, his joy infectious, and felt a warmth spread through her heart. She grasped her father's hand tighter, as if anchoring them both to this moment of connection. "Can we taste them now, or do we have to wait for everyone else?" Jake asked, his voice rising with excitement. Her father chuckled softly, the sound light and unexpected. "Your cookies do look good, buddy. Let us share them." Jake's face lit up, and he hurriedly pulled his parents toward the snack table, a whirlwind of energy. As they walked, Sarah felt her heart flutter, a blend of hope and uncertainty. She could sense the comfort of the crowd around them, yet an undeniable weight still clung to her father. It was as if he was both there and not there, alive in the moment but still shackled by the ghosts of his past. As they reached the table, Jake began distributing cookies, tiny hands moving with enthusiasm. Laughter rang out around them, bright and vibrant. The world felt so alive, yet beneath it all, Sarah could feel the cracks beginning to surface. She glanced up at her father, his smile faltering, deep lines etched into his face like the battles he had fought. "Dad," she said softly, pulling him slightly to the side as Jake continued to engage in lively banter with other kids. "Can we talk? Just the two of us?" He cast a glance at Jake, who was happily chattering with a group of smiling veterans. With a nod, he led her away from the crowd, settling into a quieter corner of the hall. The distant sounds of laughter dimmed, leaving only the resonating echoes of their own voices. "I know this is a lot. I don't want to overwhelm you," he began, his eyes searching hers. "But I want to be part of Jake's life. I want to be part of yours." Sarah's heart raced. This was the moment she had longed for, yet uncertainty bubbled beneath the surface. "Are you sure? It's going to be hard. There will be days when you'll want to run back into your shell." He nodded, his expression earnest. "I know that. But I'm tired of hiding, Sarah. I can't be that man anymore, lost and alone. I want to connect. I want to be here." His words hung between them, a silent promise, a vow brimming with possibility and fear. She took a breath, weighing the gravity of the moment. "I want that too, Dad. I really do. But you need to know that it's going to take time and I might slip up. We both might. Time is something I didn't cherish before. I want to do better." His voice trembled slightly, the sincerity cutting deep. Just as Sarah began to respond, a loud crash echoed in the hall, followed by a chorus of gasps. They turned towards Jake, who had accidentally knocked over a stack of plates, sending them clattering to the ground. Silence seized the room for a split second, and then laughter erupted, a wave of levity washing over the moment. Sarah's father groaned but couldn't help the smile that followed. "Typical kid," he said, shaking his head, but there was warmth in his tone. "Are you okay?" Sarah called out, her voice more concerned than she intended. "Yeah. I just wanted them to fly." Jake laughed, face beaming with mischief. Sarah looked at her father, and they both burst into laughter, the tension breaking like a wave crashing against a shore. But even as they laughed, she felt a shiver run down her spine. Would this moment of connection last beyond the laughter? What would happen when the laughter faded and the truths they had yet to face crept back into the quiet? As the laughter began to subside, Sarah locked eyes with her father once more, a question lingering between them. How could they navigate the deeper waters that lay ahead? Were they truly ready for the journey? And just when she thought they might find their footing, Jake ran up, his energy infectious yet again. "Can we make more cookies now?" Thinking of the mess and the potential for more chaos, she laughed. But underneath, her heart pounded with both hope and trepidation. Would they be able to tackle it together? The line between joy and fear was so thin. As the laughter and chaos resumed, Sarah felt a renewed sense of determination. If they could just steer through this time, perhaps they could emerge stronger. But she couldn't shake the feeling. What major truth was still buried, waiting for the right moment to surface? The room buzzed with renewed life as Jake darted back into the crowd, a streak of energy headed toward the table where a fresh batch of cookies awaited. His laughter intertwined with the cheerful conversations, a melody of youth and joy that filled the hall, yet Sarah could feel her father's gaze linger on the ground. She shifted against the wall, the comforting chatter around them feeling like a distant echo in her mind. "Are you sure you're all right?" she asked gently, reaching out to rest her hand on his arm. Her father looked up, his eyes reflecting uncertainty intermingled with hope. "I am," he replied, his voice steady but soft. "It's just, sometimes it's hard to shake the past. It feels like it wraps around me like a fog." Sarah nodded, understanding flooding her heart. She wished she could banish that fog for him, clear the weight off his shoulders. "We're all learning together, Dad. You're not alone in this." He managed a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's easy to forget that. I've been so good at isolating myself." "You don't have to be that way anymore," she said, squeezing his arm for emphasis. "Jake, he brings us all together, doesn't he?" A warmth spread across her father's face at the mention of his grandson, a flicker of genuine happiness. "He does. He really does." Just then, Jake burst back into their little conversation circle, a cookie in each hand, chocolate chips smudged on his cheeks, radiating mischief. "Look! I made a cookie monster. Can we decorate more? We can use sprinkles." His voice was bright, the notion so whimsical it made both Sarah and her father laugh. "And what about the rules of cookie creation?" her father teased. Jake looked up, earnest in his excitement. "More is better," he declared firmly, as if it were the law of the land. The simple humor sent a ripple of warmth through them, and Sarah's heart swelled a little more. Suddenly, the joy of the moment caught her off guard, and she found herself wishing for it to stretch on, to last. But beneath it all lay an awareness of what this all meant: the fragility of their current happiness, and the truths yet to be addressed. "All right, Cookie Monster," Sarah said, playfully nudging Jake. "You're the leader. Let us make the biggest cookie creation ever. But remember, chaos first, clean up later, right?" "Exactly." Jake cheered, dancing a little, the energy in his small body tireless. As they reclaimed their place at the table, her father let out a deep breath, settling comfortably into the moment. But underneath that stability, Sarah sensed an undercurrent, the unsaid between them lurking like shadows, ready to leap out at any moment. Could this new pact they had formed truly withstand the storms awaiting them? As they busied themselves with the cookies, laughter and flour filled the air. It was easy to get lost in the chaos, but Sarah's mind lingered on the harder conversations that seemed to froth just beneath the surface. How would they tackle the hard stuff, the painful memories lurking in the corners of their hearts? Just as she began to prepare herself for a deeper talk, Jake's voice broke through, loud and confident. "Can we make a giant cookie and share it with everyone?" "Yes. Let us do it," Sarah exclaimed. But even as she clapped excitedly, a knot tightened in her chest. Could a single cookie symbolize their desire to share not just sweetness but the harder parts of family life too? Jake looked up, his expression bright with innocence. "We're gonna invite everyone to our cookie party, right?" "Absolutely," her father said, eyes twinkling. "This party is just starting." But amidst the joy, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, did they have what it would take to face the truth, or would it crumble like a cookie left in the sun? With the smell of cookies swirling around them, it was both a hopeful moment and a precarious one, balancing on the edge of everything unspoken that still stood between them. As icing and laughter continued to flow around them, she felt the question linger in the air: how long could they ignore the truths that needed to be faced? What would it take to finally unite them against the storm? Jake kept chattering and decorating. But deep down, Sarah felt the inevitable pull. A shift was coming, and she could sense that while they were together for now, there would soon be no escaping the deeper truths lurking beneath their cookie-coated smiles. Jake's enthusiasm was infectious. With every sprinkle and swirl of icing, the kitchen transformed into a canvas of color and creativity. Flour dust floated like confetti as Jake led the charge, his laughter weaving through the air. Sarah couldn't help but smile, even as a knot of uncertainty twisted in her stomach. "Let us make a huge cookie," Jake shouted again, scooping up a mound of dough like it weighed nothing. "You mean an epic cookie," Sarah corrected, nudging him playfully. Her father stood nearby, clearly captivated by Jake's energy. They'd been absorbed in the moment, almost forgetting that the clouds of the past still loomed outside. As they worked, Sarah's mind danced between light-hearted chatter and the heavy thoughts weighing on her heart. She watched her father from the corner of her eye. He was decorating his own cookie, concentrating so hard that a smudge of icing had completely taken over his thumb. There was a softness in his expression that she hadn't seen in a while, a flicker of the man she used to know before sorrow chased him into the shadows. But would that flicker last? "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice slightly hesitant. "Do you remember that time we tried to make cookies for Mom's birthday, and everything went wrong?" Her father chuckled, the fresh sound like rain on dry earth. "Oh, I remember. We ended up with more dough on the floor than in the oven." "Yeah. And you two never stopped laughing. Even when the smoke alarm went off. Jake's laughter joined theirs, bright and airy. But as Sarah looked at her father, she felt the weight of her words hang in the air. They were veering towards nostalgia, a safe path to ease the uncomfortable truths. But where were the memories that carried the heaviness of their shared loss? Maybe we should try that again, she suggested, the idea slipping past her own inhibitions. Let us invite Mom's friends next time. It'll be like a big celebration. Her father's smile faded slightly, his eyes reflecting memories of a past that wasn't so far away. Yeah, that would be nice, he said quietly. Jake, sensing the shift, looked at them, his little face scrunching in confusion. Why are we talking about the past? We should be making cookies. What about a cookie for Grandma? He continued without missing a beat, launching back into his joyful chatter, oblivious to the tension that had replaced laughter at the table. Sarah's heart tightened. It was a beautiful thought, one that stirred warmth but also hurt. Could they really share an uncomplicated cookie celebration despite the unanswered questions? Would they all find a way to work through the storm gathering inside? Of course we can make one for her, she said, infusing cheerfulness into her voice, hoping to lighten the mood. A giant cookie to take to Grandma. Yeah. And I can decorate it, Jake exclaimed, bouncing on the balls of his feet. The notion revived the atmosphere, and soon, they were all back to swirling icing and giggling again, but as they molded their dough creations, Sarah felt the storm still brewing. Their delight was a beautiful disguise. Every laugh felt like a moment of reprieve, a distraction from the inevitable conversation that would need to happen. With every sprinkle, she yearned to break open the cocoon they had wrapped around their family, to bring out the truths buried beneath layers of unspoken sorrow. As the cookies took shape, the laughter grew louder, the sweetness overwhelming the bittersweet taste lingering just beneath the surface. But fleeting moments like this felt like a preparation, a quiet warm-up for the storm awaiting them. Okay, everyone, let us get this giant cookie ready, Jake declared, his spirit unbreakable. As they gathered to create, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if this was merely the beginning, a prelude to a reckoning that loomed closer with each passing second. Would this cookie indeed symbolize their joy, or would it serve as a reminder of everything they still had to face together? The warmth of the kitchen felt both protective and haunting. How much farther could they walk that line before the inevitable crack would appear? With the dough flattened out before them, Jake's eyes sparkled with an adventurous glint. Let us make it huge, he shouted, his tiny fists clenched in determination. Wiping a smear of icing from his cheek, he launched into action, rolling the dough with a fervor as if the fate of the cookies depended on him. Sarah watched him, that joyful exuberance lifting some of the weight off her chest. She turned back to her father, who was adding little candy eyes to his cookie creation. It struck her this was their chance to reconnect, to share joy again. The kitchen was alive with chatter, and for a moment, it felt as if they were a whole family once more. Hey Dad, how about we make it a surprise for Grandma? Sarah proposed, her own excitement sparking. We could write something sweet on it, like "We miss you." What if we made it a cookie version of her favorite flower? Jake added, scooping icing with an exaggerated flourish. So she knows we thought about her. His words landed softly, nodding toward the deeper feelings they were all still wrestling with. Sarah glanced at her father, who paused briefly before molding his cookie into the shape of a flower. He worked diligently, but she could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I think that sounds wonderful, he said, his voice steady but soft, like the first hint of morning light breaking through a long night. She always loved flowers, but there was a subtle weight to his words, a reminder of the woman who wasn't there to celebrate. Sarah felt that familiar lump in her throat. Would they ever be able to make a cookie for her without the ache? Jake broke the serious note with a fit of giggles as he flicked a dollop of icing at Sarah. It landed right on her nose. Laughter erupted, breaking the tension, and sprang forth like the energy that permeated the kitchen. She retaliated, scooping up some icing and giving him a playful smear across his cheek. In that moment, the clouds outside faded into oblivion. They were lost in icing, giggles, and a shared purpose. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the laughter was still just skimming the surface. Each cookie they crafted felt like a promise, a pledge to remind them of brighter days even while shadows lingered outside their walls. As the cookies continued to take form, each layer of icing felt like a shield against their underlying fears. But the truth was still a thorn pricking at her heart. She sensed they were building something sweet and tender, yet brittle enough to shatter at the slightest breeze. How could they decorate their lives and not face the cracks beneath their smiles? "Okay, Dad, Jake," she exclaimed, her voice a little louder than necessary, attempting to redirect the mood. "Let us make a bouquet of cookies. We can surprise Grandma with a whole garden. It'll be so fun." "Yeah!" Jake shouted again, his enthusiasm infectious. He stamped around, eager to dive back into the dough. But as Sarah squeezed icing into a daisy shape, she felt a cold rush of doubt. Would this day of joy really fill the void, or was it merely a brief escape from their reality? "Hey, what else can we add? Maybe sprinkles? Or chocolate chips?" Her voice wavered a little as she tried to keep the energy afloat. "Chocolate chips!" Jake yelled, his tiny hands reaching towards the candy jar like it was a treasure chest. "Let us make it the best garden ever." Her father chimed in, and for a moment, it felt as if they were all on the same wavelength, but as they mixed the ingredients and laughter bubbled up again, a single question loomed. What would happen when the cookies were done? Would they still have the courage to face what lay at the core of this family? Or would it simply be another moment of sweetness escaping into the air, leaving the weight of the past untouched? And amid all the chaos, a bubbling sense of anticipation arose. Would unveiling their creations bring them closer, or would the cookies remind them of the bittersweet memories they could no longer ignore? As they finished decorating, Sarah looked at the table filled with colorful cookies and felt a stir in her heart. This was just the beginning of something, she could feel it. But was it merely a celebration, or would it spark a confrontation they'd all been dodging? As the last cookie found its place on the makeshift baking sheet, Sarah couldn't help but admire their handiwork. The colorful flowers, each adorned with vibrant icing and sprinkles, added a whimsical flair to the kitchen table. It was as if spring had taken root among the flour and sugar, and the laughter seemed to cling to the air like the sweet smell of baked goods. "Look at all the flowers. Grandma's going to love this," Jake exclaimed, his eyes wide with pride. "Yeah, she really will." "This is special," Sarah said, her heart swelling with both joy and apprehension. They had come together in an act of love, yet the specter of their loss loomed just out of sight, waiting to remind them of the space she no longer filled. "All right, who wants to help me with the frosting? We should write a message," their dad suggested, the corners of his mouth lifting in a hopeful smile. "I do. I do." Jake jumped up, bouncing on his toes, all his energy radiating into the room. As they gathered around the table again, Sarah felt a familiar mix of excitement and tension. They poured icing into piping bags, and her hands trembled slightly as she squeezed the bag, forming letters. "We miss you, Grandma," she wrote, each letter connecting her more to the absent woman, a bittersweet ache echoing deep inside. When Jake took his turn, he squiggled the letters in a messy jumble, giggling as he went. With every stroke he took, Sarah felt the layers of sadness peel back, revealing an urge to remember and celebrate rather than grieve. But still, a part of her desired to hold on to the grief a little longer, afraid that letting go meant losing the bond they had with her. "Can I add a smiley face?" Jake asked, his tiny voice bubbling with delight as he reached for a contrasting color of icing. "Sure thing," Sarah encouraged, and with that simple exchange, she felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. But just as the mood seemed to elevate, the doorbell rang, breaking through the laughter like a sudden gust of wind. The sound seemed to echo louder than usual, resonating within her heart. Who could it be? A quick glance exchanged with her father told her he felt the same apprehension. "I'll get it," he said, wiping his hands on a towel as he headed toward the door. Her heart raced as she thought of all the possibilities. What would happen if it was someone from their past? Would it be a reminder of Grandma or perhaps unexpected news that would shift their already fragile balance? Jake hopped from foot to foot, his excitement bubbling over again. "Maybe it's Grandma," he shouted, leaning toward the door, the hope sparkling in his eyes. "Let us hope so," Sarah whispered more to herself than anyone else, her chest tightening. As the door creaked open, Sarah held her breath and watched her father. His face froze for an instant, the surprise evident. Whatever was happening on the other side of that door had captured his attention entirely. The world outside slipped away, and in that moment, everything hung in the balance. The warm baking smells faded into the backdrop as their reality shifted. Whatever awaited them at the door could alter everything, raising the stakes higher than mere cookies and icing. What came next could either heal them or challenge their fragile joy. Would the visitor carry tidings of nostalgia and love, or would it force them to confront a past they weren't ready to face? Jake's hopeful gaze met Sarah's, and her heart raced with uncertainty. They were on the brink of something significant, but what would it be? The door swung open, revealing a figure that left Sarah's heart skipping beats. It was a woman, slightly older than their dad, with warm brown eyes that sparkled with recognition. "Ben!" she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of surprise and joy. "I thought I'd find you here." As their dad stepped back, the woman stepped inside, a bright smile lighting up her face. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Questions flooded her mind. Who was she? Why did her dad look both glad and shocked at the same time? "Mrs. Collins?" Jake exclaimed, his voice tinged with disbelief. He darted over to her, hugging her tightly around the waist. Seeing Jake, the warmth of the woman's smile deepened, but Sarah felt a twist in her gut. "Yeah, it's me, sweetheart. I just had to come see how you all were doing. I brought something special for you, too." She reached into her bag, pulling out a small, handmade quilt. Its colorful patches swirled around like a beautiful mosaic. "I thought you could use this to remember her and maybe keep you warm while you bake." Sarah's heart sunk a little, a blend of gratitude and sadness washing over her. She could see the effort Mrs. Collins put into creating something meaningful, but the reminder of Grandma lingered heavily in the air. This gesture, so thoughtful, reminded her of the love they had lost. "Thanks. It's beautiful," Jake exclaimed, excitement dancing in his eyes as he examined the quilt. "Come sit." "We were just making cookies for Grandma," Sarah offered, trying to mask the tension that bubbled under the surface. "Oh, that sounds lovely," Mrs. Collins replied, taking a seat at the table where the cookie decorations lay scattered. She glanced at the half-finished cookies and her eyes softened. "What lovely flowers you've made. Your grandma would have loved these." The mention of their grandma sank heavily like a stone. "Yeah, she would have," Sarah murmured, fighting back the emotions that clawed at her throat, but Mrs. Collins seemed unfazed, launching into stories about Sarah's grandma, how she led the neighborhood bake sales and how her laughter filled every room. With each anecdote, Sarah felt the walls of sadness slowly crumble, letting in light. "Do you know the time she accidentally mixed salt instead of sugar in her famous brownies?" Mrs. Collins chuckled, her laughter infectious. "You all found it so funny, but she just smiled and said, 'Life is about learning, isn't it?'" A small smile formed on Sarah's lips. It was comforting to hear stories that wrapped around her like a warm hug, reminding her that her grandmother's spirit lived on in shared memories. "Tell us more," Jake urged, his energy bubbling back to life as he settled onto a chair beside Mrs. Collins. As Mrs. Collins recounted more tales, a sense of ease began to fill the kitchen. They spoke of baking mishaps, secrets whispered over mixing bowls, and Grandma's unwavering kindness. With every laugh, Sarah felt the invisible thread connecting them to her grandmother strengthen, pulling tight against the grief, but with the warmth of the moment came an unsettling question. Why had Mrs. Collins really come by? Something flickered in her eyes when she first walked in, a vulnerability that suggested she wasn't just here to share sweet memories. Just as Sarah was about to ask, the phone rang, piercing through the buzzing warmth, calling attention away from the joyous atmosphere. Her dad looked over, a sudden seriousness crossing his face. I should get that. He moved away from the table, and as he did, Sarah's heart sank again. The mood shifted. The laughter quieted, and they weren't just baking cookies anymore. What would the phone call bring? Was it news that would disrupt this newfound joy, or would it deepen the connection they were building? Jake's wide eyes looked from his dad to Sarah, confusion shadowing his playful mood. The tension felt thick again, more potent now than it had been before. Are you okay? He whispered, concern etched on his face. Sarah nodded, but deep down, a part of her wondered if anything would ever feel genuinely okay again. The darkness of uncertainty loomed again, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the call might bring more than just words. Everyone was holding their breath. What awaited them on the other end of that line? Could hope persist amidst the uncertainty? As the phone rang, Sarah felt the world around her slow down. She saw her father's expression shift, a blend of concern and urgency etched deep in his furrowed brow. The laughter from moments ago felt like a distant dream. She could barely hear Jake's whisper as he refocused on the cookies, his joy now tinged with uncertainty. Hello? Her father answered, his tone steady, but Sarah could sense the shift in the air. She held her breath, heart racing, as she caught snippets of the conversation. Yes, I understand. The weight of his words made her stomach churn. There was a pause, and then he murmured, I'll be right there. Her father's face hardened. The hope in the room dimmed like a candle flickering in the wind. He hung up and turned to face them, a mix of emotion swirling in his eyes. I have to go, he said, as if the words hurt to say. It's about a veteran friend. They need my help. Can't it wait? Sarah blurted out, the frustration tinged with fear. She didn't want this moment of connection to unravel, not now. He looked at Jake, who was busy molding more cookies, oblivious to the storm brewing above him. No, it can't, he said softly, almost apologetically. Sarah felt the heaviness settle back. But we're working on something special. The plea in her voice was desperate. I know, he said, his eyes glistening. And I want to be here. But this is important too. Can you both finish the cookies without me? Jake glanced up, placing the half-finished cookie on the table, no longer lost in his own world. I can help Mom finish them, he said, but there was a shadow in his eyes, something that told Sarah he sensed the swell of emotion sneaking back in. Can we make them our best yet? Sarah asked, her voice cracking slightly. For Grandma? Yeah, Grandma. We'll make it perfect. Jake echoed, rallying to restore the lightness that had dimmed. Her father smiled, but it didn't erase the worry in his eyes. You both know what to do. Just keep creating. Remember, I love you. He stepped back, and with that one sentence, her heart felt both full and heavy. As he turned to leave, she called after him, Hey. We'll be here when you get back. You can finish decorating with us. When he closed the door behind him, a silence enveloped the kitchen. Jake's uncertainty began to bubble to the surface as he looked around, confusion shaping his small features. Is he coming back? He asked, his innocence cracking like a delicate egg. Of course, he will, Sarah reassured, gathering herself. He just has to help a friend right now. Jake nodded, but she could see he needed more than mere assurances. They stood together, finished cookies forgotten on the table, as Sarah's heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. Let us finish those cookies, she said, her voice firm yet gentle to shield her son from the shadows creeping back. Yeah. The biggest cookie garden ever. He exclaimed, enthusiasm sparking back to life. Together, they gathered supplies again, picking up where they left off, but the mood was different now. It was more intense. With every swirl of icing, every flower-shaped cookie they crafted, Sarah felt they were doing more than celebrating. They were creating something to hold their connection, their stories, their present. "Mom, look. This flower-'s gonna be super special," Jake declared, carefully adding sprinkles. "We'll make it the prettiest one." She smiled, but her heart was heavy with the burden of their reality. As they continued decorating, words began to spill out of her, as if the act of creating freed the emotions she'd bottled up. "Jake, your grandma loved flowers. She grew them in her garden just like this," Sarah started, her voice shaky but steady. "I miss her," Jake said, idly thinking while decorating. "Why can't we just see her again?" Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. She wished she had the answers. "I know," she said, kneeling so she was at his level. "It's hard to understand. But we can keep her memory alive with everything we do. Just like these cookies." She smiled at the clumsy, colorful creations before them. "This is our way of loving her. No matter what." Jake processed this, his tiny fingers continuing to decorate, and slowly a smile returned to his face. "Okay. That'll make her happy, I think she's watching us." With determination swelling in her heart, Sarah reached to grasp Jake's hand. "And loving us. Always. And that means we can keep making memories and tell her all about what we do. I promise you, she's never really gone if we hold on to her in here." She patted her chest gently. Jake nodded, his innocence pulling his spirit back up as he switched sprinkles to icing in a flurry of laughter. "Let's finish this before Daddy gets back. I want him to see the cookies." And with that, they dove back into the joyful frenzy of baking, the laughter echoing through the kitchen like beckoning light cutting through clouds. As they shaped, iced, and decorated, visions of their family filled the space, embracing the bittersweet memories of loss while blooming into hope. They poured everything into those cookies, their fears, their love, and their shared anticipation for the future. As they created, Sarah felt a shift within her, an understanding that every shaped cookie contained a promise to keep moving forward, reminding her of both losses and love written in the rhythm of their stories. When the last cookie was finished, they stepped back to admire their creation, a vibrant garden crafted with love, laughter, and determination. "Grandma would be so proud of us," Jake exclaimed, beaming with joy. And in that moment, Sarah finally allowed herself to smile fully. They would face whatever came next. Together, before long, the sound of the door opening echoed through the kitchen. Her father stepped back into the warmth, and for once, all the cracks, the shadows, and the tensions faded beneath the laughter echoing like a soft melody. They were not just cookies, and this was more than just a family. They were sculpting their path to healing, one cookie at a time. Now felt sacred. "Hey, look what we made," Sarah called over excitedly, as Jake jumped up, eager to show their decorated masterpiece, a burst of joy radiating from the kitchen as they stepped into a glorious, shared future. In that moment, as the echoes of laughter filled the room, everything felt just right, and they began to embrace the light that continued to shine even through the shadows. Don't wait not even one more second. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories about heartwarming transformations like this. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm you need to support this amazing journey. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about this endearing reunion. And don't forget to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to show your support. The power of our stories thrives on connection.